Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tactical Startup. Thank you for joining me. This week, I'm excited to have Moshe Amsel. He is the host of the Profit with Law podcast and Law Firm Growth Summit. He helps law firm owners grow their practice with the focus on creating generational wealth. As a married, loving husband and a father of 6 children, ranging from 22 years to a baby, he is very familiar with the struggles of running a successful business and still prioritizing his family. Moshe has 20 years experience in the IT industry as a business executive. He has extensive experience in sales and marketing, having closed over 30 million in sales in a single year. In addition to Profit with Law, Moshe also owns an accounting practice, Dream Builder Financial, where he helps clients with business, advisory, and tax strategy services. Let's do this. You're listening to Tactical Startup, a podcast dedicated to building amazing businesses. I am your host, Taylor Darcy. In this podcast, we explore ways to innovate, improve, and level up your business through sales, marketing, automation, and business planning. Successful businesses pivot when times are bad and stay the course when times are good. We will have guests from different walks of life to help you see that success is not only possible, but even probable, no matter when or where you start. Through hard work and strategic planning, you can have the entrepreneurial life you've always dreamed. Tune in weekly to level up your business. Moshe, how are you?
I'm great, Taylor. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be in front of your audience, share what little knowledge that I have that might be helpful to them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable. So, and I hope my listeners will appreciate it as well. Father of 6, I can certainly empathize with that, as I am currently father of 4 with one on the way. So, how do you do it? I think is probably the best thing to start the topic of entrepreneurship and business ownership with.
Well, it starts off with understanding that I'll have plenty of time to sleep when I'm 6 feet under, and sleep is overrated anyway. So we could just throw that out the window. But in reality, it's deciding where your priorities are. And that's ultimately that's the name of the game. Is there's a lot of people out there who prioritize work, and work takes the front seat and family takes a back seat. I prioritize family. Family takes the front seat. Work takes a back seat. My coaching clients will attest to the fact that I can show up to a coaching call with a baby in hand, if that happens. And in the summer, I take the summer off so I can hang out at day camp where the kids are. I get a job at the day camp so I can hang out with them the entire summer and watch them have fun. So everything that I do is surrounding that number one priority that I've decided is the most important to me. And that's not to say that I don't prioritize my work, but I'm very clear with the boundaries and what I'm willing to do and not willing to do. And it's really forced me to make tough decisions, like needing to hire help faster than somebody else might have. And the reality is that it made me a better business owner in the process. It's almost like, I don't know if you're familiar with Parkinsons Formula. Parkinsons Formula is something that we use when I talk about profit first. But Parkinsons Formula states that given a resource, a finite resource, your needs for that resource are going to expand to consume the entire resource. So what happens with time is if you have time available, you're going to use it. Right. And by prioritizing my family, it's minimized the amount of time that's available for me to work. And as a business owner, it's forced me to figure out, how am I going to get this done when there's not enough time in the day? And the answer is not add more time. So it's really forced me to do things that people should be doing faster in their business growth, and perhaps they're not doing.
Yeah, I like how you talk about, fitting your business around your life rather than your life around your business. And I think, it's something that I struggle with as an entrepreneur business owner, because there's always something more that I could be doing, right? Like I can be doing this or that, marketing or IT. I can be looking up how to do this. Just it gets to be overwhelming, and not because I'm and then on top of that, I still have all of my legal clients that I have to work with, and so I think you've got a good attitude when it comes to that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they eat, breathe, sleep, drink entrepreneurship to the point of the demise of everything else, right? And I think that's a real problem because you burn out really fast that way. So prioritizing, and it sounds like you've got a really strong why. I talk about, you've got to start with your why, right? Start with the end in mind, right? What is the purpose of you being an entrepreneur? Is it just to make money? Which I'm not judging that. I'm just saying that's a factor that you need to consider when you're making decisions, is what's your why and why are you doing it, so that you can make good decisions. And that's the purpose of the Tactical Startup Podcast, to help people think more strategically rather than just hoping for good. What are so it sounds like you've got some pretty strong systems in place. What are some systems that you have that you started with that you wish you would have done sooner?
Well, that's a really good question. And one of the things that business owners think when it comes to systems is that I need to have it all figured out. I need to have everything documented and memorialized before I can actually put somebody in the spot to execute on those systems. And the reality is that that's not how it works. Systems get built as you go. And often basically it's like anytime that we do something that we find we're doing a second time, we're going to create a system around it. So it's not like, I sat down and said, whoa, what are all the systems that we need? And then we created those, and then I started running my business. One of the so there's a lot of areas of what we do in our business that require systems in order for us to succeed, especially with the size of team that we have, right? So it's a small team, but we're accomplishing big things. For example, we have our law firm growth summit, where we get 2,300 law firm owners attend a 3-day event virtually. We get 35 speakers. We had 20 sponsors at the last event. All of that has to be coordinated, organized. Things have to happen. So the first time that I did it, I flew by the seat of my pants, and it was just me. And I was out there hustling and making connections and meeting with people. But by the time I got to the second time around, I said, okay, this is how this gets done. Now we're going to create a process around it. We put it into, we use a project management system. So I use Zoho for a lot of things in my business. So I use Zoho Tasks or Zoho Projects to do that. But you can use Asana or Monday or Trello. There's a lot of different, project management boards that you can use, or even there's one that's just for creating tasks lists. The name is escaping me right now. It'll come back to me. But we use projects, and everything goes in the project. And what happens is that when a step is missing, we add the step in. But now the next time we need to execute on that project, we simply copy the previous project and just change the due dates and change who's assigned to each task. But now we've got everything, including what we missed. So every time that we recognize there's something missing, we add it. And my team, we do a ton of record my screen, and this is how I do things step by step. And that goes into the task so that the next person who comes in can click a link and watch a video of someone else doing it. They don't have to figure it out for themselves.
Right. And I think it's so much better than, continuing to do the same thing over and over again, right? Like recreating your wheel each time, and then having to, figure out, okay, what was missing the last time. And so by, you're creating a system that not only is scalable, that was where I was going with that, is that now anybody can walk into anybody's shoes and take off, right? Like the learning curve is a lot less when things are documented. You're not struggling with the issue of, oh, I have to go and explain this to somebody else again. And that's, weeks out of my time that I don't have to spend teaching somebody something that I should have done already, right? Um,
Yeah,
so
and Taylor, it actually it even works with customer facing, right?
right,
So, for example, we run a full-fledged accounting bookkeeping firm.
right,
When a new client comes on, we put them into a document management system where they need to upload their documents to. They need to email it, they need to upload it, they need to do those things, right? So there's a certain level of education required to the customer. So even that is a process where this is the email to send out once somebody is onboarded, when somebody's going through the onboarding process, and you link to these instructional videos. And then we follow up and make sure, did they watch it? Did they actually get set up on it? Are they sending their first receipts or statements? So those are things where it enhances the customer service experience, because the customer it sees, oh, you've got your act together,
right.
you're on top of it, you have a system in place, and they feel cared for because you're reaching out, checking on them, and all of that.
And I think to add to that, it inspires confidence, right? Like you've been there before, you understand their needs already, like just at the very beginning of a relationship, and I think that is has so much value to it because one of the things on my YouTube channel, my most popular video is 7 signs you hired a bad attorney and what you can do about it. And the number one complaint I get on there is the attorneys don't communicate. They don't talk to their clients. They don't explain to them the details of their matter or their case. And so one of the things I do is I send a welcome letter that outlines basically a communications policy, how to work with me, how we're going to work together. So while it's not a video of showing them how to do things, which that's a very good point, I should do that. It gives them like an expectations list, right? Like so that it's clear. People don't like being confused, and there's a lot of issue when you confuse your clients, right? It causes unnecessary frustration between the parties, unnecessary angst, right? When they're already going through a difficult situation, typically in law. And I would argue any attorney with dealing with accounting is, that's not why we went to law school. So creating those expectations or creating those communications is pretty important. So what like wisdom, what would you say, like just start with like your number one thing that you see that would automatically catapult somebody's business from being novice to professional? What would you say is that?
Um, this my answer to this question is changing over the years. The more that that I have experience working with business owners, the more I'm recognizing where we can go earlier in the process and fix the problem so that they can actually move fast where they want, faster and better. I think that the number one issue today is being undercapitalized.
Mm,
And it's a very interesting place to go because it's not what you would expect, right?
right,
But the reality is that we are in a day and age where you can, for $100, buy a domain name, get a Zoom phone line, get a website, go to Wix or Squarespace, and have a website up and running. And $100, you have your business operational with a phone you can answer and a website and email where you can receive emails. So the mentality is that we don't need anything else. And therefore, I can go out and start a business with $100 and put my sweat equity in. And the reality is there's nothing wrong with that. However, if you understood what was possible for you in 12 months, if you simply put 4 bodies into your office and had one doing sales and one doing customer service and one doing the actual work, and now you went out and started your business with those 4 people there, your business could be, instead of you taking a year to get to 100,000 where you get to keep 50 of it, you could be at 1 million where you get to keep 250 of it. And
mm,
that only happens when you have the money to do that. Now, most people, if they were well capitalized on day one, would spend the money on things that they shouldn't be spending it on. They would waste a lot of it, and they would end up not getting that level of success. So I think
right,
that there's a scale of a balance of like when is the right time to be capitalized. But the reality is that if I look at what takes a business so long, it's when the owner thinks sweat equity is how they grow the business, and not recognizing that it takes money to make money, You have to take risks. You got to be willing to put a person in a role before you're ready for that. And therefore, you need to have the financial wherewithal to do that. And you can either save and create your own cash war chest, or get a line of credit, or take out a home equity line of credit, or get a partner. There's a lot of different ways to get access to capital. But the reality is that if you did have access to capital at various stages of your business, it would allow you to step into the next step of growth, which really holds people back. When you're running at capacity and you're profitable, you actually don't have enough money to really add to the, take that next step. So now you have to take the time to save it, and you're constantly in this mode of not being able to pay yourself,
Right.
because I'm putting the money for the next level of growth. I'm putting the money for the next level of growth. So you're either losing money, or you're profitable and you're saving it to invest in the next thing, where you can just use a bank for what a bank is for, let them loan you money, pay a little bit of interest, and you can pay yourself well along the way, and also have the fuel that you need for the next level. So the number one thing is money.
Right.
But right behind it, there's a few other things if we want to talk about those.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So at the top three things that I think business owners just suck at, right? Like if they could do these three things better, they'd be light years ahead. Number one is pricing their product or services. And that's the easiest place to start, because it doesn't cost you anything to change your price.
Right.
And everybody approaches this from what is in the market and how do I undercut the other person, right? So if it's a professional like an attorney or a psychologist, or anybody who's selling time for money, they'll look around and say, okay, what is everybody else charging per hour? And now I'm not going to be the lowest, but I'm not going to be. I'll be in between the lowest and the mid range, right? And that's the completely wrong way to go about figuring out how to price your product. Um, if you're selling a widget, right? You're
Right.
selling something like, I don't know, I'm producing this really cool baseball bat, and I want to sell it. You go in Walmart and go into Dick's and go into Modell's and say, okay, what are each of them charging for a typical baseball bat? And that's where I'm going to start my pricing. What's going to happen is that you end up needing to compete with other businesses who are more established than you. They've got more figured out than you. They're further along in their journey. They can make money at that price point. You may not be able to. So you really need to approach it from, what do I need my business to produce for me? And then what's my capacity of production, and how do I get that out of the resources that I have? And that's really what you need to do when it comes to pricing, to really price yourself well. And I work specifically with law firm owners, and I can tell you that probably about 85% of the law firm owners who come through my coaching program raise their prices significantly, like somewhere between 25 and 40% within the first 90 days.
Yeah.
And that makes a massive difference, right? That
Yeah.
could be the difference between working your butt off and having nothing to show for it, and actually starting to have a profit and feel like you actually have something moving and working well for you.
Yeah, and I think there's something worth pointing out is, you never want to be the lowest, because then it becomes a race to the bottom, because someone can always do something for cheaper, right? Like, or they're going to choose to do something for cheaper. And so setting your price, even in the mid range, makes you average, right? It puts you
Right.
in, your competition is average. And if especially if you're delivering a superior product or superior something, you don't want to be average, right? Like, that just creates a dissonance between the customer experience, customer expectations, and your ability to deliver that. Because if you're charging a premium, then they expect a premium, but the error in the premium category is rare, right? Like, because there's attorneys will, oh, I only charge this much, or I charge this much per hour. I don't do billable. I only do flat rate for the reason of, I think it's unfair. A billable hour for me is I don't, it doesn't work. I just think it's a smarter bet to share the risk between the parties in a flat rate work rather than a hourly. So tell me about what, besides, okay, so we've got money and then we've got pricing structure. What next? What would be your next thing to tackle when you're sitting down with somebody to talk about getting them profitable or improving their business?
Yeah. So the next thing is absolutely staffing. And staffing, people assume staffing means hiring expensive, in office, highly paid American workers full time with benefits. And the reality is that there's so much out there, so much that you can get that doesn't require any of that. And you can really, really fuel your business with when you open your mind to what's available between freelancers, contractors, full-time virtual assistants, full-time professional assistants that are in the Philippines or in Central or Latin America, that are in even in the U.S. Right? There's a whole scale of help that you can go from just adding talent to a specific project to adding hours to your team, and then there's professionals in it, like practically every industry has a solution now where you can contract hours to somebody to fill a gap, to get something done. And uh, there's a great book called Who Not How. I'm sure that you've heard of it, probably
Yep.
talk about it a lot, but it's that question that really is what we're talking about. Every time that you have to do something in your business, are you really asking yourself, who can do this, not how do I do this? Because our gut, our automatic instinct is, how do I do this? We'll go to YouTube. We'll go. I mean, I do it like my dryer stops working. I'm not calling the repairman. I know that's going to cost me $400 or $500, and I'm going to question whether I should actually just go buy a new dryer. Instead, I'm going to go on YouTube. I'm going to watch a couple of videos, see what the most problematic part is, order a $5 part on Amazon, and I'm going to tinker and I'm going to fix it. And the reality is yeah, you could do that in your own home if you want, but when it comes to your business, if you do that with everything, it's going to slow down your growth. And what's wrong with slow growth? Well, it's missed opportunity.
Right.
And business owners don't recognize what the value of the missed opportunity is. And I'll put it to you like this, right? If I told you that you have the ability to in 3 years be running a $3 million business that's bringing home $500,000 in profit for you, or you can take 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years you'll be running a $5 million business with $1 million profit. Which would you rather? Assuming you're not profitable before the 3 or the 5 or the 3 or
Right.
the 10 in that example, right?
3.
Obviously you want to be profitable to the rate of 500,000 a year in year 3 and not wait to year 10 to be at $1 million profit, right? Because
Right.
you would have had 7 years in between of $500,000 in profit. You would have made 3.5 million by the time you got to year number 10, where you're first profitable in the other business. But that's what we're doing.
Right.
When every time that we choose to do something ourselves and not to hand it off to somebody else, we're slowing that down. We're moving the target of our success further down the road.
Okay. So my struggle is I've found people to hire, and I've had some positive results, but mostly negative results. And some of it's my fault. I will absolutely own that, right? Like I was poor at explaining what I wanted them to do,
Mm-hmm.
in some instances. So I will absolutely own my inadequacy on that one. But there were definitely some not so great people that I hired. They didn't follow the directions that I did give, even when I was better and clearer, and I was able to, give that. How would you, how do you find these people that are high quality, right? I mean, because not all VAs are equal, right? There's gonna be, you're gonna get a mixed bag. Like that's just how it is. And so you're gonna have to go through some potentially, but how can you cut that down from going through a lot to a few?
Another really good question. I'm going to plug my podcast, Profit with Law. If you go to, I think it's episode 34 or 38, I have an episode called What's Your Hiring Process? So if you go to profitwithlaw.com, in the search bar, just search for What's Your Hiring Process. I break down my hiring process at that time. I've added stuff to it since then. Um, but the answer to your question is that often the reason why we have bad hires or bad employees or people that don't do their what we expect them to do is a combination of things, but often it's because we were in a rush
Mm-hmm.
to hire them. And because we were in a rush, we cut corners. We weren't willing to wait for the right person. And even though our gut told us that this person, I don't know if I'm so excited about them, but they check a few boxes, and I need to put somebody in that seat, so I'm gonna offer them the job and see how it goes, right?
Right.
Um, so that's what gets us in trouble, is when we waited too long. Now we're in a rush to put somebody in that seat, and we're just gonna and we get frustrated fairly quickly. We want results quickly, and we make that poor decision. Um, I've been telling my coaching clients now, have a job ad out for an attorney all the time, even though you're not looking for an attorney right now. And the reason is because you will get people applying for the job. And there's no rule that says that you can't put a job ad out and actually not fill the position. You can do that,
Yeah.
right? So you get to constantly be honing in your skills of interviewing, checking somebody out, seeing what's out there, seeing what they're asking for. And then you might actually have somebody that comes in where you're like, oh my gosh, this person is like the perfect candidate. Like, they check every single box. And then you can go and figure out, how can I bring them on the team, even though it's not actually the time right now, right? I'm not ready for it. But or you could choose to just put them on the back burner. Look, I would decide not to fill this position right now. I love you. I would offer you a job in an instant if I did. Is it okay if I reach out to you when I have something available? And now you've got that person that you've already vetted in the
Right.
wings. So I use an attorney as an example, but you can do that with any position. You can always be on the lookout for good talent. You can be standing in the line at Starbucks, and somebody spills coffee, and you see how somebody else jumps out of line to help them, and you're like, wow, that person is probably going to be a good employee. Let me strike up a conversation with them and talk to them about what's going on in their life. Maybe they actually need something, or maybe they have a skill set that I can use, and they'd be interested in evaluating whether working for me is right for them.
Right.
So you always want to be looking for good talent, even though you're not necessarily ready right now, rather than when you're ready. Oh, now I got to fill this role, and I went through 30 interviews. I'm tired of this, so I'm going to settle for the next one.
Mm.
We're in the process right now of being in that mode, right? Somebody left.
Yeah.
We need to fill their shoes. We need to fill their role. Um, so I'm in the interviewing process for that, but I'm always checking in with myself, right? Like, do I like this person because I like this person because they're checking the right boxes? Or am I tweaking the results of what I'm seeing because I need to get somebody in that role? And I'm just being very present with myself about that. Um, but then there's other things you could do to test them, to question them as you go through this process. So one of the things that we do, behind me, I have the book Traction. It's over my right shoulder, and Traction has an EOS business system. So if you're not familiar with the book, it's written by Gino Wickman. He has another book called Rocket Fuel. Those two books together really give you the big picture of the EOS system. I'm a big fan of it. We don't officially implement EOS, but we do have most of EOS in our business. But one of the things that he identifies in there is that when you're hiring somebody, they have to have two components, right? They have to be the right fit for your organization, and
Right.
they have to be the right person for the role responsibilities you're trying to fit. So you can have somebody who comes in who they line up with your business completely. Like, their core values are just perfectly aligned. They love what you do. They have a motivational story of why they would love doing whatever it is that you do, and they're just in love with your company. You're in love with them. Everything's beautiful, right? But then you're trying to fit the role of a salesperson, and they don't check any boxes for sales. Like, they would suck at sales. Without
Yeah.
recognizing that you have those two separate components, you might make that hire and try to force that position on them. And the reality is that they would then end up being miserable, being awful at their job and quitting, or you firing them. And it would lead to this conversation of, I don't have successful hires, right? Everybody seems to be the wrong person. The reality is they were the right person, but not for that job. Like,
Right.
had you found the role that they could thrive in, that they would love, it would have been a perfect match. And then there's the other way, right? Like, okay, I need a salesperson. I bring somebody in, and he's like Grant Cardone, and I'm a Simon Sinek guy, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like quiet and just optimistic, and and he's like rah 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 rah, and I want to own a jet.
Right.
They don't mesh with each other. So he might be the best salesman in the world, but if he doesn't fit into the mold of your organization, the core values that or the what's the word Eric Farber uses to describe the uh, what's going on in your company.
Culture.
Culture. Thank you. Sometimes we can't come up with the word.
No
Yeah, the
worries.
culture, right? So it has to be a culture fit.
Right.
And it's very possible to get somebody who's really good at that role, but they're not a culture fit for your organization. If
Right.
any of those two pieces don't fit, it's not going to work out.
Right.
And you have to evaluate for that. Like, we literally do a core values assessment in the hiring process, and we match it to our core values. We want to get at least 2, hopefully 3 out of 5 that are a match. We do a Kobe assessment to see if they will mesh well with what their direct report has assessed is important for that role, as far as their critical thinking, the way that they handle things, and all of that. And we use that Kobe assessment to compare them, with that direct manager's report. So it's basically a Kobe C that the direct manager takes and a Kobe A that they take, and then the Kobe compares it and gives you a grading from A to F. And we'll do anything from B minus and above. We'll take. We really like A plus, A minus.
Of course.
A B, a solid B, is still okay. B minus is we're already starting to question, but anything below B minus, and we're like, forget it. It's just not. They're not a fit for the role. It's just a no go.
Right.
Um, so those are some things that you can do. Another example is just give them work to do. Like, for example, right now I'm hiring a replacement, a combination executive assistant project manager. And what I did is I said, here, I'm going to give you a fairly easy assignment. But what I want you to do is I want you to go and do this, and come back to me with the result. And what I did, this is a international VA that I was talking to, so somebody in Mexico, and I said, I'm going to be flying into Rochester, New York, and renting a car and driving across the border into Canada. What I want you to do is I want you to call the rental car company. Make sure you're talking to the counter in Rochester, not to the customers, not to the call center, and confirm that I can drive this car across the border. Simple task, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's happening is I gave them an easy job to do, but there's a lot of places where they get tested along the way.
Right.
And she replied to me, and there's also how long did it take for them to do it, right? So she sent me an email and she said, I actually couldn't figure out initially how to make an international call. I didn't have that capability. I resolved that problem, and I spoke to so-and-so who confirmed that they were at the counter in Rochester Airport, and they said that because you're renting a regular sized vehicle, not a large truck or van, there's no problem with you taking it across the border. Here's the name of the person that I spoke to, and that was what she sent me, right? Now, she aced that test,
Yeah.
right? But you can have somebody who comes back and says, hey, I can't call international, and that's the end of the test, right? Can you give me another one? And
Yeah.
then you get somebody else who comes back and says, yep, I called and you're all good. No detail, who they spoke to, didn't confirm that they actually were speaking to the counter. So there's paying attention to the detail of the instructions, and then the communication piece. How do they communicate back with you? So there's so many things that are intertwined in that one little thing that I handed off, where now I got all that feedback back about that person, that this is how they operate. I get a much stronger sense of okay, when they come on, I can expect similar things when I start handing them things to do.
Right. Right. I think that's interesting. Now, like when you do that, do you pay them for their time to even the test?
So the answer is no. For this one specifically, I didn't offer to pay.
Okay.
If I'm giving them something that's really like work, like for example, if I'm hiring a bookkeeper, I will give them, like, I'll give them an account and I'll give them an actual assignment to do, and it's going to take them a day. I
Right.
pay for that.
Okay.
So we'll pay, like, if we think it's going to take them a few hours, we'll pay a really high rate for those hours, so that they feel like they're being compensated for it. They're not being asked to do something on their own free time. What I asked her to do, it's a 5-minute phone call, right?
Right. Right.
I don't feel like I need to compensate for that. So it really depends on what you're doing. So if you're hiring an attorney and you're having them research a topic or write up a brief or, anything like that, you definitely want to pay them for it. So
Right.
you really have to look at it and decide, what's the level of work I'm asking for? Do I feel compelled to compensate this person for it?
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I've had it where I believe everyone should be paid for their work, right? Like, and I agree with you in that a small task like that's 5 minutes, not a big deal. But yeah, you get some of these crazy employers that it's like, no, I want them to do an audition for the job, and I don't pay for that, and it's like, okay, but that's not fair. Everybody's time is valuable, right? Like, everybody should be compensated for their work. And if that'll be it's less money to spend to find out it's a bad fit than it is to find out that it's a bad fit after they've been hired simply because you didn't want to spend the money in the beginning, right? Like, that's a good, I mean, however much you pay them, 250, 300, whatever dollar amount that you come up with, is a lot cheaper than the cost of having them do it wrong, long term, and then having to fix it later, right? And getting into a bad fit.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one more thing, and that on that regard is, you're actually, if you don't pay them,
Yeah,
right, for the work you're asking them to do, when you're really asking them to do work, um, you're actually pushing away the good candidates, because good candidates are not gonna they're not gonna do
yeah,
it, right?
yeah,
Somebody
absolutely.
who knows their worth is not gonna do the assignment. They're gonna be like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah,
If you want me to do that, I'll be happy to. Here's what I would charge you to do that, or here's,
yeah,
what are you gonna pay me? Um, but that'll, there's this adage, like, A players, when you are interviewing A players, they're actually interviewing you.
right,
So when you're interviewing somebody, if they're not asking you questions about what it's like to be in your business and what are you doing about X, Y, and Z, if they're not interviewing you in the process, it's not a two-way street, and
right,
you're simply asking questions and they're sitting there answering them, that's a pretty good sign that they're not an A player,
right,
right? And it's the same thing with having them do an assignment. Like, anybody who's good at their job will be happy to do the assignment if they get paid for it. If you're not paying them for it, they're gonna see right through that. They're gonna be like, yeah, I don't think so. You're just
yeah,
getting free work from me. So it's more than just setting the tone, doing the right thing. It's also, if you want to have a good hire, you can't do things to repel them.
yeah. Um, are you familiar with Cameron Herold's Vivid Vision?
I am not.
Okay. Um, he takes the concept of mission statement and basically says, to the effect, I'm still working on it. That's why I can't say with absolute authority on the matter. But he comes back and says, you can't expect a sentence or two to adequately convey what your business is about. And so he has the vivid vision, right? That's his thing. And
Mhm.
so it's a long document. It's almost a narrative of what he wants to see his business. And so it enshrines the culture. It enshrines all of those things that you were talking about earlier about the right fit for the position, and knowing that. And I think it's important to recognize that skills can be taught, right? Those are easy to do, but if they're a terrible fit because of culture or because of position, that you run the risk of uh, a poorly skilled person that's a right fit getting overlooked, right? And so many resumes, so many job applicants, all they do is focus on the skill portion. Can you do a draft of a brief? Can you, in legal world, can you balance a ledger for a general ledger, that type of thing. But yet at the end of the day, those things are easy, right? The skills are super easy to teach, but having someone that has the right attitude, has the right fit, as you were talking about, a Grant Cardone versus a Simon Sinek, huge difference between their personalities, between who they are and what they represent. And so when you put it in the context of this vivid vision, you're starting out, and one of my other mentors, who was previously on the podcast, talks about that with his vivid vision, he gives employees before they're even hired the attitude of how can you help this vivid vision come true, right? Like as opposed to sticking a round peg in a square hole or vice versa. He's making sure that they get on board with his vivid vision in that respect. And I think that's got some value to it, right? Because now you're not just looking, you're bringing them along the mission instead of pushing them on the mission, right? Difference between leadership and management. So
Yeah, I like that a lot. I will tell you that, contrary to the belief that you can't get a mission statement into a single sentence, my mission statement is to empower all people with wealth creation so that this and future generations can lead a better life. Now, sure, that doesn't encapsulate what I do exactly with attorneys and stuff like that, but anybody who hears that understands that I'm trying to help people make money.
right.
I'm trying to help people. Um, I'm trying to help people with enhancing the lives of not just themselves, but the people that are going to come after them. And I have a story around why that's my mission statement, right? It's part of my life experience. My grandfather came from Nazi Germany with nothing, lost his mom, his twin siblings, and ultimately ended up starting a business. He was a diamond merchant, amassed some wealth from that, bought an apartment building on the west side of Manhattan with four of his cousins. And by the time that I was a young married parent looking to buy my first house, I found out that he went ahead and funded the down payment of the first home purchase for each of his 36 grandchildren,
Oh,
myself
wow.
included. Um, and he also helped with private school tuition. I was raised Jewish Orthodox, and everybody goes to private school. It's very expensive. You have a whole family going. Like I had 3 kids enrolled in private school. It was
Wow.
30,000+ a year, and he helped every year with that private school tuition because he did a really good job of creating wealth that he could then share and make a difference in his grandchildren and great grandchildren's lives. And that really inspired me to try to help other people do the same. And that's what I'm excited every day to wake up and get to work, because ultimately that's what I'm after.
Right. Wow. That's a powerful, story. And that's absolutely amazing. I'm so glad you shared that. My story is somewhat similar, and not the Nazi Germany, but my parents grew up carpet cleaners, and I saw their struggles and legal issues and stuff, and so hence why I became an attorney to help businesses
Right.
like theirs with legal issues, right? Like, and so I think that's interesting, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you don't have to have a vivid vision, right? But it's the idea that to try to be as detailed about what your goals are as possible, right? Like not just set it. You have that in your head, and not settling. There we go. For verbal platitudes, right? That's part of who you are. It isn't just a verbal platitude. It isn't just something you came up with in order to sound like the newest, greatest thing, right? Like
Right.
you came up with it because of your experience and that you want to share with others. And that has more power to it than the CEOs that are just like, we want to, and it's very like, we're just doing it because that's what the latest fad is.
Right.
And so I think being in touch with who you are and your family, and the generational issues, right? We all have them. Doesn't matter who we are. We all have different issues, and working to help either perpetuate the good things and or diminish the bad things can be a rich part of our company's culture, right? Like that can be something that we can instill in our clients, right? Having good experiences with attorneys, especially like I was saying with my podcast. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, I
Yep.
thought I hit a button. Having a good experience with an attorney, right? Like, unfortunately, there's some bad ones out there and so same thing goes for you. There are people that have bad experiences and they label every person like that, even though it's not actually true. But giving your business the respect and honor that it deserves, we do that by empowering others, right?
Mhm.
I wanted to get back. You said there were four things. I think we've been through three. What was your number four?
Yeah. So interesting. The fourth thing is uh, doing things in the right sequence. So essentially, the model that I follow is plan, grow, and scale, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the three main steps, and there's a lot of sub steps in each one. But essentially, a business owner needs to have a vision of what they want, and then put that down on paper, right? Plan for it. Um, 90% of or something like that. I'm not going to throw a statistic out that's not accurate, but there is a statistic put out by the Small Business Administration, and it's something along the lines of 90% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years, right?
That's correct.
Um, and the reason that happens is because they were doomed from the start,
Yeah.
and they were doomed from the start because their business model never worked. Had they simply taken the time to take a piece of paper and pen and say, here's what I'm going to charge, here's what I'm going to produce, and here's what it's going to cost me to produce that, and
Right.
here's what I'm going to have left at the end of the day, they would have either fixed the problem before they started or they would have never got started. So I think planning is like the most important thing. That's the forgotten art. It's really not complicated. Anybody can do it. I teach a process that I call back of the napkin math, where it's like two buddies in a bar and they take a napkin off the bar stool
Right.
and, and just write some numbers on it. That's all you need, right?
Right.
Because that basic gut check will tell you a lot.
Yeah.
And it'll really highlight the fact that you can't make money doing what you just thought about doing. It's not a great idea, right?
Yeah.
People think, oh, it's a great idea because everybody needs it. But did you think about the profitability of it? No. If it costs you $10 to produce $1, is that a good business? Not at all,
No.
right?
Yeah.
So plan is number one. Then grow is to take the capacity that you already have and to fill it.
Mm-hmm.
So because when you start, you automatically have capacity before you start. So that's why I go plan, grow, scale. In reality, if you don't want to be in the business, you're starting a business purely as an investor, you probably want to go plan, scale, grow. But grow is where you take um, the existing resources that you have and you get them to capacity. Now, not where they're maxed out, so you're beyond capacity, but you get them to capacity where you're producing a healthy profit margin, which should be 40%, and in a good healthy business. And then you scale. Then
Right.
you increase the capacity that you have to then step back through this process of go back to the planning stage and then grow again and then scale again. And what happens is that we skip the planning. Like 90% of business owners are skipping the planning. I just know. I mean, like, there's nobody who comes through my coaching program who has a business plan written down and is ready to say, "Oh, I already did this. Here it is."
Right.
Right?
Right.
Maybe one out of 100. Um, so that's the first thing, and then
Yeah.
the second thing is not putting the cart before the horse. Right?
Yeah.
Don't go and hire a bunch of people when you haven't figured out how to sell a widget.
Right.
But at the same time, don't sell a million widgets when you only have capacity to produce 100. So
Nice. Yeah.
you have to find that balance and step into it. Recognize who you are, where are you at, what's your identity right now, and then fill that, and then
Right.
grow from that. Unless you have a lot of money to throw at it, then create a lot of capacity, but have a plan to fill it. Like
Right.
you can put 1,000 bodies in a room and say, okay, you're going to produce X amount of widgets, and you're going to but we got to sell those. We got to figure out how to get that cycle going and not just have a whole bunch of things we produced that we can't sell.
Right.
So you really need to step through this process. And the biggest mistake that business owners make is simply just doing it in the wrong order. Like, they're either hiring when they should be getting their people busy. They're investing in marketing when they don't have something to sell yet, or they don't have the capacity to deliver, and all of a sudden they've got all these leads coming in and they have to flush them down the toilet because they don't have people to execute and fulfill on them. So you really have to pay attention to that stuff and make sure that you're doing things in the right sequence.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. That's something I hadn't heard before. So I really do like that. I had one client who was like wanted to be a social media manager company, and I was like, okay, that's cool. You do you. But then she only wanted to charge what she'd been charged being paid as an employee. And I was like, you do realize there are other costs that you're going to have that you can't just charge that. Like, it just isn't going to
Right.
work. You need to be able to market. You need to be able to pay your taxes. You need to be able to pay da 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 da. And I started listing out all this stuff, and I was like, you probably want to be charging around, if you're going to charge hourly, which I don't recommend for things, if you can avoid it, try to charge value based is what I like to call it. You want to charge $75 to $100 an hour, roughly, give or take, for when we started calculating all of those figures. And she was shocked that I had said to charge as much as I did, and she ended up not doing it, and she did. She ended up going out of business, and I felt bad, but I'd done my due diligence, and I said, hey, what you got paid as an employee is not what you should be making as an independent business, right? You should be
Right.
making more. That should be what you're ending with, if that's what you so choose, not beginning with, because everything gets chipped away at that point.
Yeah.
So you've been absolutely amazing. This has been a lot of fun. So I like to end podcasts with 3 fun questions that people get for my audience to get to know you and to like you and trust you more. And so the first one is, what's something that I would never guess about you?
So this is something that we talked about in the green room before we started, but didn't come up in the conversation, so I can use it here.
Sure.
I'm a paramedic. When I was 18, I joined the local volunteer ambulance squad and really enjoyed it, loved it. And when I went through my divorce in '06, I decided to go through a 2,000 plus hour training program while I was a full time employee to
Wow.
become a paramedic. And it's something that's I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of unicorn space.
Mm-mm.
I heard somebody talk about it recently. So I was at a lawyer conference, Max Con, and Elise Bowie, an attorney you're probably familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
She spoke on stage and she talked about this concept of a unicorn space, and it's actually from a book. That's the name of the name of the book. I forget the author off the top of my head, so you'll have to Google it. But it's this idea that everybody has like a thing that they do that like gets them away from reality, and it's the thing that they just love doing and enjoy doing. For some people it might be flying an airplane, for other people it might be woodwork. Everybody's got their thing. We like to call it hobbies, but it's when I say, oh, it's a hobby for me, people get the wrong idea. Like, I'm not volunteering, I get paid doing it. But it's a
Right.
break from reality, and it's something that really fills me up. Just going into people's homes and in crisis and helping them and saving lives, and a certain camaraderie and brotherhood, and or I don't want to use the brotherhood as saying there's no females. There's plenty of females.
No, yeah,
But brotherhood, sisterhood,
I
it's
gotcha.
another social area that that I could be in. So I really love it. But no, you look at me and what I do. I'm an accountant. I'm a business advisor. I'm a coach. You wouldn't guess that I'm also moonlighting as a paramedic, but I do, and I love it, and gives me a lot of stories to tell.
That's really cool. Yeah, I don't have anything that I'm doing like that. But once upon a time, I did want to be when I went back to school originally, I was pre-med and wanted to do neurosurgery, which was crazy, but I tried. And I couldn't get past calculus. Calculus just seemed to just kick my trash no matter how. I took it 4 or 5 times, and I could not
Wow.
get past it. And so my hat's off to anybody. I'm great with numbers, like concrete numbers, but calculus in my brain just was not working. But yeah, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and that didn't work out. But that's okay. I like being an attorney, so and I like doing this, so I'm happy with that. What the next one
You
is?
should add that to your list of questions, right? Like what's your alternate career track that you never took, right?
Right. I'm sure there's lots of them. Like at one point, I wanted to be a police officer. Then I took the post exam and found out that was a bad idea. For the other reason, and not for the snobby reason, was I scored so high on the post exam that I was legitimately worried about being in having a partner that didn't score as well on the post exam.
Mm-hmm.
And it, yeah, again, trying not to be egotistical about that one. But anyway, the next one is, what's the funniest name you can think of for a pet?
Um, this is one that's got me. Honestly, I could tell you what the name of my dog is,
Hmm.
and you might think it's pretty funny. His name is Rascal Flatts.
Nice.
So, we named him after our favorite country band, and we just call him Rascal. So everybody thinks, "Oh, it's so cute. He's a rascal." You call him Rascal, but no, he's named after a band.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
so yeah, that's what I'll go with.
Okay. My old boss, I was a loan officer for a credit union once upon a time. They named two chicks, Sam and Ella. Sam and Ella.
Yeah,
So
got it.
that was
Oh,
pro.
there's another story that comes to mind, which will, is really funny. But my in-laws, their dog passed away,
Hmm.
and she died a lot earlier than expected. She developed some kidney issue and very rapidly decompensated and passed away. And my wife asked me to go with her and her mom to some bereavement session that was being held at the animal hospital.
Hmm.
We go to this bereavement session, and there's a lady who is absolutely off her bonkers, but she's talking about her Shih Tzu, and her Shih Tzu, who she named Shitter.
All right, all
And
right. That's fair.
this Shih
That's fair.
Tzu would go and would just poop under the Christmas tree, and like all in the house or whatever. So they named it. That's what they named the Shih Tzu, and
All
so
right then.
that's another funny name there.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. I don't know that I would ever get my name. My wife would never agree to naming our child, our dog, that. Like never, ever, ever in a million years. So, but that's appropriate, I guess, given the context of that. That's funny. All right, so last one. If you got stuck in an elevator and were forced to listen to only one song, what song would you pick?
So I'm a Simon Sinek kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Optimism is something that like ingrained in my fabric. Um, I would do something like Eye of the Tiger. I mean, just something that just keeps me amped up while I'm waiting to be rescued or whatever is happening. Because I mean, I can jam to that all day long.
Okay. Have you ever been stuck in an elevator before?
I have, and you want to know that story?
Sure, why not? I've got one too.
So it was with my ex-wife, but we were married at the time. My brother got married to a girl in Montreal, so the wedding was in Montreal. And for his wedding present, my wife and I at the time, my ex-wife, and I, we paid for the hotel after the wedding. So we put them up in the Ritz Carlton in downtown Montreal. And what we did is we went there during the day and we put like rose petals down on the floor leading up to the bedroom. And they had a fireplace in the room, but the hotel wouldn't light the fireplace if you weren't in the room. So after the wedding, the plan was we were going to go to the hotel, go up to the room, light the fireplace, leave, and then my brother would come with his bride, and the fireplace would be burning. So we did that. We got to the hotel, we lit the fireplace, we left. We made sure that they were close. We left. We got in the elevator, and the elevator got stuck. And we were stuck in that elevator for a while. I don't remember how long it was, but it had to be in excess of an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
But we ultimately eventually got out and ended up having one of the least expensive wedding presents we ever had to give, because not only did they refund the room, but we got our taxes back at the border, so we made money on the deal. But
Oh my,
uh,
that's awesome.
but it was an experience for sure.
That's awesome. So mine isn't quite as momentous as that one, but it's pretty good. So I was actually at my office currently, and we were I used to be up on the second floor, and one day, just randomly, I was coming out of work to leave. I was trying to leave early, ironically, of course. And I get to the bottom of the elevator stops just short of where it normally does. And I didn't know why, but the door wouldn't open. So I'm just sitting there and I called their uh, elevator repair company, whatnot. Sit there for a while. Their phone goes dead. So I ended up calling them back on my cell phone. Thankfully, I had full battery and everything like that. And I'm just sitting there and sitting there and I'm just sitting there. And I thought to myself, why not? So, did you ever see the movie You've Got Mail?
Yep.
Okay, remember when they jump in the elevator to see if it'll dislodge it?
Mm-hmm.
I tried that and it worked because what happened was is it had gotten to the bottom, but it didn't trip the sensor
Mm-hmm.
enough to open the doors. And so when I jumped, I just hit it just right
Jostled it.
enough
Yep.
to do it. The elevator repairman still came and fixed it and whatnot. But I called them as I was leaving, and I'm like, I'm not taking the elevator for a very long time after that. No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty scary thing when you're stuck in there, and also when you think about like how an elevator is built.
Right.
Like it's a long trip to the bottom, or it's a like there's a lot of things that can happen with an elevator malfunction. But talking about jumping in elevators, early in my EMS career, there's a nursing home that we would go to all the time. At the time, it was called the Hillcrest Nursing Home. Now it's called Pine Valley. Unfortunately, we nicknamed it Pine Box, but. Anyway, they had the elevator we went in when we went to a job there. You got in the elevator and it's this rickety old thing. And one of the first times we got in the elevator, we pressed the button and nothing's happening. It's not going. It's not, and the medic who's, seasoned, been there a long time. It was my first time there. He looks and he goes, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to count to three. And when I count to three, we're all going to jump up and jump down at the same time. And we go 1, 2, 3, jump up, jump down, and sure enough, as soon as we hit the hit the elevator floor, it started moving and went to where it needed to go. So that was a common occurrence. Later, I learned that was like that's how you did it. Like that elevator
Yeah,
got stuck all the time, and you just everybody jump and got it going.
that's funny. That's awesome. So, last thing. How can my listeners find you if they're interested in talking with you more about hiring you or just business coaching, business help?
The best thing is profitwithlaw.com. Check out the podcast, check out the website. I mean, you tune into what we're doing. Our support email address is there as well. You can find out more about anything that we do from there. So that's all roads begin and end with, with the podcast. It's really the one place that, we're there consistently.
Sure.
Without fail, and you can always find out about the latest and greatest what's going on in our world if you just go there.
All right. Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we'll talk to you later. Okay.
Taylor, thank you so much for having me. This
You're
is
welcome.
a lot of fun, and I hope it was helpful for your listeners as well.
Definitely. I hope so too. Thank you. That was Moshe Amsel, and he was absolutely fantastic. And we actually had quite a bit of fun talking in the green room before we even started, and our love for tech. And I feel like I've begun a great friendship with him. As always, think about your business. Think about it tactically. Think about the ways that you can plan and develop your business. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one.